Right now here on the John Neighbor Show, we're joined by another very special guest, as we know that it's always college football season. People have been really involved with basketball for the Razorbacks, John Calipari. But, hey, there's still plenty of things to talk about with football because football season will be here before you know it, especially SEC Media Days. And who better to talk about it than friend of the show, even though it's first time technically on this show. It is Chris Marler, who is of 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge, as well as the Fourth and Wrong podcast, and he joins us now. And it's been a while, Chris. How's everything going for you?
It's good, man. It's good. It's funny. I've always envied Arkansas in a way because I think they're one of the few SEC schools where like there's not really a drop off, right? Like from like content and things to care about, at least. Like I know basketball sucked this year for sure, and I know that postseason in baseball can be difficult, and football has had issues at times, but like. There's not a more passionate fan base about all three sports, probably, maybe in all of the SEC, which I love. And yeah, man, it's like I always thought it was funny because like when I would do like baseball stuff, like cover baseball stuff for the SEC, for a while there, it seemed like all the teams that were good at baseball were terrible at football. And then like Mississippi State and Ole Miss were natties and stuff like that when they were not doing great in football. But now it's like, it's more of a balance. I always envied Arkansas having something to care about for 12 months.
Yeah, well, when you're the only game in town, like that is the thing. It makes you unique and passionate, but also a little bit. It can be a little bit much to deal with because at the end of the day, there's no pro teams here or anything, so it's like they treat them like professionals, even though they're still like 19, 20-year-old kids. So, but yeah, the passion's definitely there, man, and I know that. For what people are feeling like right now, I think the craziest thing and what everyone's looking at in football, at least, is Bobby Petrino's back. Like, I mean, come on. Bobby Petrino, which everybody, not even just college football fans, but everybody in the sports world and in the landscape knows what happened. Knows what happened the last time he was at Arkansas and the last time he was head coach. He had a neck brace. There was a motorcycle wreck. There was a mistress. It was all that. And now he's back as the offensive coordinator. Like, this is almost... You couldn't even write something as good as this. But what did you make of Pittman making that move and making that hire to bring Petrino back into the fold?
I thought so. One of the things I was like worried about with Pittman, because there's not a single person in the country that wants Sam Pittman to fail. Whether you cheer for a different team or whatever, you may want your team to beat him, but nobody is rooting against Sam Pittman. I love Sam Pittman, man. I was worried that he's just such a good dude. He cares so much. And he's really, I think he's one of the people in the sport that like still really, really loves like coaching almost more than collecting a check, if that makes sense. Like he's really passionate about what he gets to do and stuff like on a day-to-day basis. I was worried that he was not going to be able to pull the trigger on things like this and make tough decisions that would make the program better in lieu of like saving people's feelings or like what might be like perceived as a bad move or the optics on the outside. I love this move. But listen, I'm born and raised in Atlanta. I'm still a little bit petty and upset about what Petrino did to the Falcons. But I mean, I think if you're being objective about it, he's one of the best offensive minds in football. And when Arkansas was at their peak, and people forget about this. In 2011 and 2010 as well. But in 2011, Arkansas was the third best team in the SEC, but no one talks about it because they had two losses to the best two teams in the country that were historically good teams. But that's a guy that came in and was able to like have a very exciting offense, super efficient offense, put up incredible numbers. And he's still been, I think a great offensive mind just at different stops since then. I love that they brought him back to Arkansas. I think it says a lot about what Sam Pittman knows he has to do this year, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think Razorback fans are putting their excitement because at the end of it, like people were wanting Pittman gone. And I think everybody agrees with what you said about Pittman. Like no one's wanting him to fail. Like Razorback fans are wanting him to succeed, but you can't go from 9 wins to 7 wins to 4 wins and really inspire hope. But the Petrino hire inspired that, and I've never seen it, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. Arkansas and Duke are playing each other in basketball that day that it was announced in Bud Walton Arena. Yeah. And I walk into the arena. Of course, it's packed because it's Duke, but I see students where they have their shirts off and on their chest it's painted Bobby. Like these are freshman students that were probably like 6 when this thing happened, when he was last coach, but they had it. And then they started 3 different occasions. They were chanting Bobby. And one of those times they did it was when they rushed the court after beating Duke, they chanted Bobby. You don't do that and have that for any other coach and any other coordinator, any other position. And that's what makes it so unique. And I think that's what Razorback fans are hoping. And this is why I want to get your take and see if it works. Because the thing I know about Pittman is everything that you said, but also he lets coaches coach. Sometimes it's to his detriment. Sometimes it's not. And I think that's why it might actually work out better than maybe what we saw at A&M, because it was pretty evident, or at least what Petrino talked about, is like he had to learn their lingo and he felt uncomfortable. You knew that Jimbo didn't want to hire an offense coordinator. Thought he was a good enough to coach. But I think in this situation with Arkansas, Petrino got his quarterback in Taylor Green, the transfer from Boise State. They got some pieces there, and an offense hopefully ends up being better. But if Pittman truly lets Petrino be Petrino, which from all intents and purposes is what I've seen, I think this could actually be something that makes the offense improve well enough to at least make Arkansas a competitive team.
Yeah, well, one, I want to go back and just publicly shame Arkansas basketball fans for storming the court. It's not okay to storm a court when Duke has lost. It's honestly like you guys going out of your way to target Filipowski is dangerous and uncalled for. And no, I'm obviously kidding when I say that.
Hopefully he was okay. Hopefully he was okay.
Okay, we just thoughts and prayers out to Filipowski, or whatever, how you pronounce his name. But no, I think you're right. Like, I thought we all looked at last year, going into last season, think about what the optics were for each school, right? Like you had Arkansas coming in off a 9-win season, 7-win season. You get KJ Jefferson back. You arguably had what we thought was going to be the best 1-2 punch in a backfield in the entire conference with him and Rocket Sanders. And, you end up in the season, you finish 10th or worse in all 4 major like offensive statistical categories. Then you look at A&M and it's like, oh man, this is the thing that's been holding it back, is like the offense and Jimbo and kind of being like a little bit antiquated with some of his play calling and like he keeps a leash on his coaches more than he should, especially when you look at the success that wasn't coming with that. And so I think him and that Cheesecake Factory menu playbook that he had on the sidelines every single game, it was very obvious that Petrino was not the one calling the shots 100%. I think Pittman is going to take a step back and let him like probably get out of his comfort zone and let Petrino have full like the leash will be very long with him. And like, because here's the thing, it can't get worse than what it was last year. And especially from an expectation standpoint of what you had going into the season versus what you actually produced on the field.
Yeah, I saw my brother. I saw a game in person that ended 7-3 in regulation last year in Razorback Stadium between Arkansas and Mississippi State. My brother in Christ, I saw that. And that's something that I don't think I ever want to see or witness again. That was it was terrible. But but that's the thing that Petrino can add. Yeah. And I've looked through, of course, I've known him when he was at Arkansas. I was a student at the U of A, so I felt like had a great run when I was a student on the football side of things. But I guess my question for you is, with Petrino, he's been doing this a long time, and it really dates back to even when he was at Auburn, had that team when he was the OC with Jason Campbell and Cadillac Williams, and that offense was really cooking. Everywhere he's been, the offense has been great, has improved. When he was at Louisville, Heisman winner, he has all these things. Yeah. So I guess my question for you is, why has Petrino been so good for so long? Because you see a lot of coaches kind of teeter off a little bit and end up not being as good. But for you and what you see of Bobby Petrino, what's made him so good over the past 20 to 25 years in college football, where everywhere he's been, he's had success?
So I think one is he does a good job. I'm fact checking you right now. He was the OC at Auburn 2002. You're right. I forgot about that. Yeah. And I was wondering, the reference it was such a long time ago. But yeah, I think you look at the resume, right? And he's been able to do it at different levels. Like he obviously, it's tough to coach in the NFL, and fandom aside, like it's difficult to do that. I think the one thing that I was saying about Bobby Petrino from a collegiate coaching standpoint, he's done a very good job at adapting and having, when he needs to change and when the game around him is changing, he's done a good job at changing with that as well. And the other thing is too, I think the creativity that he has with offense, that's the thing that I think stands out more than anything. Like I've said for a long time, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin are the 2 best offensive minds in all of football, including the pros, in my opinion, right? 2 best offensive minds. The way that Steve Sarkisian will scheme guys open like best example I can give, like what he did with Devontae Smith in 2020. There's no reason that a kid should have had 1,800 yards receiving and 23 touchdowns, but he did such a good job of getting him involved in so many different ways. And he was able to do it with, like, obviously a plethora of talent there. But go back to when Arkansas was like really firing on all cylinders when he was the head coach. The creativity, I hate to harp on this one team example, but that 2011 or 2010 Bama game, when you come out and the place is on fire and you go 23-yard gain, I think, to the tight end, and the next play is a wheel route to what's the kid who's Wingo from
Ronnie Wingo Jr. Yep.
Yeah, and he goes down the sideline and obviously you're up 7-0 in 2 plays. That place was, I have goosebumps right now, and it was against my favorite team. But I mean, that was, I think, that kind of creativity, that kind of stuff that he was able to do. And now, granted, he did have some talent, especially on offense at the time there, that they probably don't have as much of currently on that roster. But I think that's the thing that he's so exceptional at, is that, you know, like there's people that are going to outwork you a lot, and maybe like these guys that are going to just go like what's the best way to put it? That have to outwork themselves. I'm not saying Bobby Petrino's not a hard worker, but he's got something that other people don't, and it's all up here, right? It's like all up in his brain. And there's a lot of people in the country that cannot match what he has up there.
See, that was my whole thing, is just the mindset. And you mentioned adjusting. I think that's something that coaches maybe get stuck in a little bit, because, I mean, you remember the time, right? Rich Rodriguez was the greatest offensive mind of all time, you know, like, and obviously it didn't pan out for him, but to have that success is crazy. And that's what's crazy about even the SEC, Chris, is that, you know, we know that Texas and Oklahoma being added into the conference this year is a lot of change, but you're talking about also coaching changes. You know, Nick Saban, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he stepped down from Alabama. It's in all the papers this morning. But yeah, he stepped down. And you got him. You got Elko over at A&M. That's now a new coach after Jimbo gets his $1 billion contract buyout or whatever it was. There's just been a lot of changes, and now you don't have divisions anymore. They had the schedules changing up. So just, I feel like everyone's on the same page, where it's like right now Georgia is still up here. Feel good about Texas. You know, we'll see if it looks pretty good for them too. But just how do you see the rest of the SEC, or is there maybe some other teams that people aren't talking about that could have a legit chance at contending and winning the conference this year?
Yeah, well, so one thing I want to backtrack just for a second before I answer that, and say one more positive thing about the Petrino situation. Yeah. And it's something that is like piggybacking off of what you brought up with the SEC. One thing we've also seen the last several years in the SEC, and I think it's a good sign. Second chances, right? And like, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like Bobby Petrino, but like, you know, there was a time 10 years ago where Lane Kiffin was one of the most hated people in college football. And now he's like universally liked. Like the character arc that guy's had has been crazy. I remember him getting hired at Bama, and someone asked me how I felt about it as a Bama fan. I remember saying it would be like if that like dickhead or British general from the Patriots switched sides and started like coaching, or started like playing for like America. But like, you know, I think like Sark used to get a lot of flack for like some of his issues that were off the field, and look what he's been able to do. I think there's a lot to be said for second chances, and I'm hoping he'll be able to do that. Which is, you know, maybe 5 years down the road, like we have a totally different view of him. Back to what you said about who is going to do what in the SEC this year. I don't feel as strongly about Texas. I think they lost a ton of offensive talent, and it's weird too, right? Like we talked about Texas for if you look at the last decade, for 9 straight years, we talked about Texas as like, oh, they always do the least with the most, like. They're always able to recruit, but they always suck. They're never going to be back, blah, 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 blah. They have one really good season with the most elite talent they've had on that roster in well over a decade, right? And then you lose all that. Like you lose your 3 best receivers and your tight end. And then you go ahead and lose your top 2 defensive linemen that were both, one of them won the Lombardi Award. So it's like, how do you replace all that? Like, do you replace all that in the portal? Because I mean, Isaiah Bond's really good. Is he as good as Xavier Worthy or A.D. Mitchell? I don't think so. So I think that like we're a little bit overzealous on them coming into the league and just kind of running roughshod through it, because we've all seen what the SEC does to really good teams. It chews them up and spits them out. So I'm not completely sold on them. I will say what Texas and Oklahoma provides for the SEC, like that bringing them in, the ceiling on some of these programs, and I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, but the ceiling on some of these programs like Kentucky, Mississippi State, South Carolina, where 9 wins or 10 wins kind of feels like where the ceiling's at. that ceiling is a little bit closer to the floor now. And I think that like it gets lowered a little bit because now it's even more difficult, especially without divisions, on being able to compete, not just for a spot in the SEC championship game, but like they're even further away from ever getting to a playoff.
Well, we're speaking with Chris Marler of the Fourth Wrong Podcast of ESPN 104.5 out of Baton Rouge here on the John Neighbors Show. Chris, I mentioned DeBoer over there at Alabama. I know you're an Alabama guy. I always felt like whenever Saban retired, I was not envious of who was going to replace him because the expectation is through the roof. I even have some Bama fans of mine friends of mine that I give a hard time because it's like they would be up 21-3 on Tennessee late in the second quarter and they'd be mad. They'd be furious because the defense is trash, like all of this stuff. Yeah. So there's no doubt that the expectation's high. So for DeBoer, like what does he need to do? I know winning a championship, but that's just such a tough thing to do. Nick Saban made it. He's an iconic thing, but what does he need to do to make sure that he keeps the support of all the Alabama faithful here in year one?
So, I mean, like here, man, that's tough because here's the thing. I think DeBoer's a really good coach, and he's had really good success everywhere he's been. And you could say like, oh, it's only because he was at, what was it, Fresno State, and he was at Washington. The Pac-12. Pac-12 sucked. Like Pac-12 was the second best conference in the country last year, and it's not really debatable, to be honest. And you saw that with like, especially with some of like the first round draft picks and elite talent they had coming out of there. Not to mention, teams like Oregon and Washington. From the hiring standpoint, it was like, all right, Dan Lanning seems to be the guy who's like at the top of this list, right? That you would have like that you want to hire. Well, you didn't get Lanning, but you got the guy that beat him 3 times in the last 2 seasons. So I love that. The big thing I think that he's going to have to do, obviously, is recruit the South, which is not something he's had to do before, but he's done a good job of so far. And that staff, I think, knows that as well, which is another part of it. Like we talk so much about like the head coach and like the quarterback position and like easy scapegoats when things don't go well. Dude, it's so important. It's just so important for a program and a head coach that you're making the right hires. There's no better example than 2019 LSU, right? Like you go out and get Joe Brady to be your offensive passing game coordinator, and you look what happened from 18 to 2019. Like these are some really, really important hires he's going to have to make. And hopefully he's made the right ones. But if you're being realistic, which I try to be, he's going to be expected to make the playoff, and it's expanded to 12 teams, so he's going to be expected to make that even more. But you look at that schedule, like what's most realistic is that he's probably going to win 9 games and probably not make the playoff. And how are Bama fans going to react to that? Because, like they could be a really good team this year. They could be a really good team, but they lost 39 players to the portal. And as you know from recruiting, like those 39 players were most likely elite blue chip players. And now you got to go play Georgia, at Tennessee, at Oklahoma, at LSU, Mizzou at home. I tell you the thing that worries me the most. All 5 of those games, like you have to get to 10 wins, I think, to make the playoff here, right?
That's fair.
The Tennessee and Georgia game, I think, are losses. So you better hope you don't slip up at Wisconsin, Mizzou at home, at LSU, at Oklahoma, and then you get Auburn at home. But like when Vegas released their updated season win totals, there were only 3 teams in the SEC that saw their win totals increase from February to May, and that was Tennessee from 8.5 to 9.5, and then Auburn and Oklahoma from 7.5 to 8.5, from 6.5 to 7.5. All 3 of those teams, there's only 3 teams that increase in their win totals. There's only 1 team in the entire conference that plays all 3 of them this year, and it's Alabama. So I think that it's a very big uphill battle that people are going to have to be patient with.
And I don't think anybody in the SEC is going to feel sorry for him. So
not at all.
Yeah, I think the thing everyone's like, okay, good. Now that you can finally have a little taste of your own medicine, Alabama. Maybe you can finally have it. Before I let you get out of here, Chris, I know that based on, of course, your social media handle, Vern Funquist of college football and everything, what'd you make of first off, I'm still upset that the SEC is not on CBS anymore, but then you had the SEC on ABC, like, reveal.
Yeah.
I don't know how you felt about it, but I'm like, womp womp. Like, okay, cool. Like, it was like, I feel like there was no creative bone. I don't know. I felt like it's like, is this really what y'all are pumped up about? But I guess they're more pumped about the money. But what'd you make of that?
I mean, it was odd they chose a shield, because if anybody could have ever used a shield SEC wise, it was Gary Danielson from the Fans when we were on CBS. The thing with ABC, like I did expect more. I didn't think it was that bad. I think what's going to be more interesting is if they're getting their own unique song, because that is going to people like the amount of Wellbutrin that people are going to have to take in Lexapro from across the Southeast. The day you hear Rutgers and Wisconsin with the SEC theme music playing is going to be a sad day. It's going to be a sad day for all of us. I think that like the actual design itself, like the graphic, I don't think it was that bad. I just feel like it could have been so much more. Like, it's just like, and that part I didn't really get. But if you also saw what College Game Day tweeted that morning, where somebody got in Microsoft Paint and made the graphic for the A&M Notre Dame game, my God, maybe our expectations should just be lower.
Yeah, I mean, is this AI doing it for them? Like, I don't
It's
know.
It's not that good.
Yeah, like I think even AI could do a better job of it, but it was just like, I don't know. Yeah, because I am going to be very upset not being able to hear the SEC on CBS theme that I've grown up listening to. It's like, you know, they took away Jefferson Pilot from us. Now they took away SEC, and it's just like, man,
thanks a lot, Bin Laden.
Yeah, what do we have now? What do we have? I'm hoping that, like you said, a unique song, but I don't know. I'm still going to watch the game, so it doesn't matter.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I really think this is something they should do because so much of the sport has been it's drifted further away from God and the fans, and it's like, you know what I mean? It's like every change they've made, none of it's really for the fans at all, and we're the ones consuming it, and we're still going to for the most part. But I wish they would do something just as like a tip of the cap, like a nod to the fans, and have like, dude, one game a year, broadcast the whole thing as Jefferson Pilot. Get every Dave you can find that because all three of those guys were like a Russian stacking doll of like the least overweight to the most overweight, sweatier and sweatier as you went. That's all I want. Yep. I want a Vandy Ole Miss 27-24 shootout on Jefferson Pilot in 103-degree August heat. That's all I ask for.
I want Dave Baker sitting in his director's chair at 10:30 in the morning Central Time in Neyland Stadium, yelling at me why this matchup between Tennessee and Vanderbilt is the game to watch for this weekend. That's what I want to. Like that was always the thing I remember as a kid, sitting there in his director's chair and his little hair blowing in the wind ever so slightly, and him just yelling at me. But I'm with you, man.
Dude,
Let's make that happen.
I watched a replay of one of these last offseason, and I'm not making this up, and it was something that was like a 12:30 game. I want to say it might have been Arkansas and somebody, but it was a McFadden game. And I remember they coached to the sideline and he was in a folding chair. I mean like your uncle's outside the RV folding chair, just run of the mill. And that's how far we've come. It was hilarious. So
yeah. Well, let's hope maybe they can bring it back to us one day. That's all we can hope for. But either way, it is Chris Marler, and you can follow him on Twitter, or the X Machine, whatever you want to call it, at Vern Funquist, College Football, or CFB. You can also check out all of his great stuff with the Fourth and Wrong podcast there on ESPN 104 Baton Rouge. And as always, Chris, we appreciate you joining us, man. Enjoy the offseason. We'll be catching up with you, all right?
Of course, brother. You have a good one.